Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
It is I, the one, the only.
Anyway, hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
The Comics Kid 2099.
And a geek for fun.
Indeed. And today we are discussing what, Mr. Rubin?
Adaptations, and when is it okay to change adaptations? I don't remember what our four-word buzz phrase was last week, but we're just talking about adaptations.
Yeah, when it's okay to adapt, when it's okay to change an adaptation, yada yada. Mm-hmm. And see, this is something that I've got, kind of... I feel like I have a really set opinion on this one, and so sometimes we go into these discussions and I don't really know how I feel, and I'll kind of like play around with different arguments, and sometimes I've got like a strong take, but I'm willing to be, like challenged on it. This one I'm just like, I'm not sure I could have a different opinion on this. It's just, I feel like I've noticed it so strongly, I don't know if I can have another take. And so my opinion is, adaptation is almost always better unless it's so far off the mark that it might as well be a different thing, because in adaptation you have the opportunity to fix anything that was wrong with the original. You have the benefit of hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with that 100%, because I feel a lot of that, then you just get into like subjective arguments about what one person believes has to be fixed for like certain things, but generally I can see where you're coming from with that.
Okay.
And I think you can also have that raises a question of what is being adapted. Like if you take a Tarzan story that was written over 100 years ago, there's going to be a little bit of racism in that story.
A lot of bit of racism.
If you want to adapt that, you're going to have to make some changes, unless you could, maybe a filmmaker would say, well, we're just staying true to the spirit of the story, and it's not our fault that it's racist. So well, that's a risk they can take. I don't know if that's a good idea, but they could do something like that, or they could say, we're gonna do something different here. Maybe they decide to do a Tarzan story where Ward Greystoke is a black guy, and he's from a part of Africa that's with people, or I don't know. Like you could try something like that. Then it's a slippery slope. But then if you have something that's like much more recent, like written in the last 10 or 15 years, then you have different things that you'd have to overcome those obstacles, I guess. Different obstacles to overcome.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like when you adapt something more recent, it's just in the public consciousness more, and so it's more likely to be scrutinized for not being like the original. Whereas I'm kind of weird. Part of it's because I don't particularly care for Alan Moore, but like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, V for Vendetta, and Watchmen are all better movies than they are comic books.
Wow.
I disagree on League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but
I heavy disagree on Watchmen. You're wrong, Ian.
I mean, Watchmen is a very important book. It's a very like well thought out book and stuff, and the film obviously has a lot of problems, but generally speaking, I enjoyed the film. I enjoyed parts of the film more.
See, I will lay down my general take on adaptation right now. Like, my sister, she likes to read a lot of like young adult novels and stuff, and like anytime a movie comes out where it's based on something she's read, she will always instinctively say, well, this is wrong. They changed this one tiny thing from the book and made it slightly different in the movie. I don't like that. And I always say, who cares? You still have the book. You can still read the book. And you can watch the movie that's slightly different. Like, it doesn't have to be the same exact thing. And I've had this conversation with so many people, and it's just like hitting a brick wall with your forehead. Like, nobody, anytime I have that conversation, people are just like, well, it's different. And I'm just like, what? But, yeah, it's different, okay? It's a different thing. If you are adapting, I don't know, like the first Harry Potter movie, they took out a scene that was in the book where Hermione, she's like trying to, it was a potions thing that Snape had set up in their obstacles trying to get to the Sorcerer's Stone. Mm-hmm. And that's a scene in the book that's not in the movie. And my sister was livid that wasn't in the movie. And my thinking was, okay, but that might be interesting to read, but that might be a pretty boring scene to watch. Like, if she's just looking at all these potions and then drinks one. So I think, and also my cavalier attitude towards faithful adaptations comes from reading comic books, where very rarely are you going to have a straight up adaptation of a comic book story. We've had 80 years of Superman comics. Anytime there's a Superman movie, they are not going to adapt a Superman story. They're just going to create a new story and use characters from the source material. So I've never felt like we had to have faithful adaptations, because in the stuff that I actually care about, we don't get that. With the exception of like Watchmen, which is based on a limited source material, like a novel. Mm-hmm. But Batman, they're just going to take a character here, they're going to take an aspect of this story here, and they're going to kind of throw it in a blender and see what happens. And so that's why I don't really care that much most of the time when they change something from script or from page to screen.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny, you brought up Harry Potter, because when you were first talking about like they changed this minute little detail and you brought up Harry Potter, I just flashed back to like 5th grade. God, I'm old. I flashed back to 5th grade when the first movie was coming out, and everyone's like, why'd they put the scar on the side of his forehead? It's supposed to be in the middle. And I'm just like, I don't remember if that bothered me or not, or if I just parroted it because I heard other people say it when I was a kid. But I look back on that now and I'm just like, that's dumb. Why does anyone care? So like it can get to that point where like changes that don't matter and people complain about because they're just pearl clutching the original source material so hard. But then there's, I think, the other side of the conversation, which is the other side of the pendulum. When they adapt it so much that it's not even kind of the same thing, it like anything but name, if that. And so my go-to for that is the Super Mario Brothers movie. That fucking weird ass movie. Like, there's no Peach, it's Daisy, there's Bowser's a fucking dude, Yoshi just is like a pet velociraptor. It doesn't make any damn sense. It's like they took some very basic concepts from the games and then just kind of sort of not really put them on the screen and made up all their own bullshit. And I understand it came out at a time where Mario's never really had a proper story, but it came out at a time where Mario's story was looser, its characters were looser, but still, just, God, it's awful.
And so you're not wrong. As an adaptation, that is probably the worst single example in history, but I still love that movie.
Okay.
And you're not wrong, and I'm not even going to say it's a good movie. And I think I've been kind of dominating conversation a little bit, but I'll stop after this. But I discovered that movie at a very young age when I had not played any Mario, and so I didn't have a lot of people, they had, well, what the heck, like what you said, this is nothing like the games, and I didn't have any experience with the game, so I was just like, I love this movie. It's not a great movie. It's definitely a horrible adaptation, but I still like it, even with all its warts and all.
I mean, that's fair. So like I'm trying to think of all right, let's use this as kind of the spectrum. All right, so we have Harry Potter, which it cuts some stuff, it changes a few things here and there, but nothing major. I think you can watch the movies and you've basically gotten the gist of the books, if nothing else. You have Super Mario Brothers, which just misses the mark in a huge way, regardless of its quality on its own. As far as an adaptation, it might as well just be its own movie. I'm trying to think of something in the middle, and it is kind of fresh in my mind, so I'm gonna go with it. Because my video on it just went through hell. The Punisher, 2004. That is one where I would say it's right about down the middle. Maybe leaning a little further away. I know a lot of Punisher diehard fans don't like it, but more of a general audience cares for it. So the Thomas Jane Punisher movie, where his family dies as a result of gang violence, and kind of as a result of gang violence. They're targeted by the mafia. That's gang violence. His family dies because of gang violence, and so he declares a war on crime and brutally murders criminals. It's all there. It's a lot of the characterization has changed. The background on why his family is killed has changed. Some of those two mix, depending on if you want to go with the Frank Castle manipulated the situation to get his family killed so he can have an excuse to war on crime. That's a very different take on the character. But like that one, I'd say it's got elements. You can definitely call it a Punisher movie, despite your personal feelings on how the Punisher should be. I think that one's straight down the middle.
Right, and I feel like there's an interesting element to that, because once you start doing something where it's still recognizably the elements of this character, but in a new setting or in a new interpretation or what have you, I think another maybe good example is probably leaning far more to like a good adaptation, but it's like the Dark Knight trilogy is a very different kind of look at a Batman universe, and like how you interpret that is in a different lens, but still very much Batman. But it lends itself to almost becoming its own thing, because it's trying to tell something. It's trying to tell a story that normally what you're adapting in the source material wouldn't be able to, because of the confines of that world. Is like Batman's world in the DC universe where he lives is so fantastical inherently. You can never truly do super realistic in the regular DCEU, because you just in the regular like comics universe, because everything around him's so crazy. But by taking him out of that and putting him into his own thing, you can kind of take a different look at it. So I feel that there's merit to that, and I'm in the camp where I do feel like if you're going to adapt something, you might as well change it, because my reasoning with any interesting story is like it's been told for a reason. Like, it's not just a story about a story, it's someone's trying to say something about something with this piece. And I feel like a mistake a lot of people make, and this is my biggest thing with the Watchmen movie, is Watchmen is a comic book about comic books, and you can't just adapt that panel for panel for film. It's not, because it's not about films. So it's really completely misses the mark in that point, because it's too close to the adaptation. Like, I think it would have much benefited from straying further and further away from that, especially at the time period where superhero movies were coming out, like starting to gain that giant bit of buzz. You could do something about that. But so I do feel like adaptations, there is a line. But I also feel like if you're going to go for it, you might as well go for it, unless you're doing something where you're directly trying to take a famous piece of literature, like a singular story, and give it to a new medium, like say the Dark Knight Returns animated movie, where it's very, very close to the original source material, simply because it's not trying to do anything different. It's just showing it to a different audience who wouldn't possibly. Frank Miller's got a very unique art style. Let's put it that way.
See, and it's funny because it is a very, it is kind of getting on that point of like, it's a very nitpicky problem, but it legit doesn't work for me. It takes me out of the movie, and it makes the Dark Knight Returns movie one of, in my opinion, is the most unwatchable of the direct-to-DVD animated DC films. Changing the narration to dialogue in that film, like, I've only been able to watch that film. I waited till both were out and I watched it all in one sitting. I've only been able to watch that film one time. The changing the narration to dialogue irked me so much, because it, by making that change, it is surface level. There really shouldn't be anything wrong with it, but it changes the context of the words. It changes the feel of them, even though most of it's just Batman's internal monologue. Even though most of it's just what Batman's thinking, you're just taking it from what he's thinking to him saying stuff, and it just nope. The second you take it to him saying it out loud, it loses something for me.
That's interesting then, because I guess I'll just ask you is, do you feel, because you're so familiar with that work, because we've kind of mentioned earlier how people were maybe too nitpicky about things. Do you feel like once you have a custom familiarity to, I've read this loads of times, I know how this feels or something, I know how this is supposed to go, or what someone's tried, the isms of this, I know what this is trying to do. When those things are changed, to an outsider they may seem nitpicky, but to you they're like integral. Do you think that has any weight?
I mean, I feel like you're really hyping up how much of a connection I have to The Dark Knight Returns.
Well, that's why I don't understand why it's such a big of a problem for you.
Well,
it's such
it's
a
just
small change.
Like, the thing is, I've only read that book maybe 5 times, which, you know, it's like when you read it when you're first getting into comics because it's what everyone does, and then you go back to it every so often. And, I think it's a very good book. I think it's very important, yada, yada, yada. But it's just, it has this very particular feel. The rain on my chest is a baptism. I'm reborn. I'm no longer a man of 60. I'm a man of 40, of 30, of 20. Like, that when he says it out loud, it feels silly. But when he thinks it, I don't know, there's something kind of freeing about it. Especially because there's such an internal struggle in Bruce Wayne in that, particularly in the early parts of that book, where literally Batman is talking to Bruce Wayne in his head, where he's like, you thought you could drown me with alcohol, with women, but you can't. I'm stronger than you. Those are, just the second he's saying it out loud to himself, it loses something. And so I know it might sound kind of nitpicky and weird or whatever, but I can't do it. It changes the context of the meaning, because I think everyone has had a thought that raced into their mind, and and you just have to stop a second and go, whoa, where did that come from? I don't think that. But you did. And I feel like that's the context for a lot of the monologue in Dark Knight Returns. And so when he says it, there's almost like this quality to it that changes it. And I understand it's specific, and I understand it's all that. I don't think it's because I have such a connection. I think it's because it makes a fundamental change to the piece.
I think that makes sense. I guess then going off that, do you feel like you almost wish they went further then with the adaptation of Dark Knight Returns?
Well, what really killed me is the year 1 adaptation was pretty good, and they did the narration in there, and then the Dark Knight Returns adaptation came out the next year, and they didn't do the narration. And it killed me. If they'd done it in both, at least it would have been consistent, but they didn't, and it's weird for that reason. And I don't know if I can do a review of that movie outside of just the that one specific thing bugs the shit out of me.
It's funny that you say, like you mentioned a Punisher earlier, and then you said diehard Punisher fans, and immediately I was thinking of two Punisher fans. Haven't spoken to either of them in years, but they both hated the Thomas Jane Punisher movie, and I could never understand why. I would even tell them, like, guys, objectively speaking, this movie is 100 times better than the Ray, what's his name?
Warzone? Oh, God.
Yeah. I said, this is so much better than Warzone. And they said, and he, one of them, he had a good point. He said, it may be a better movie, but the character of Frank does not feel like the character of Frank from the comics. And I thought about that because he was whining, and to this day he whines about how Frank Castle is sitting in his room crying at his family dying. And I said, his family died. Like, I don't care if the Frank in the comics is an emotionless robot who shoots people and doesn't mourn his family's death. Like, this is something that but he said, it's different than the comics. And my thought again was, who cares? You still have the comics. You can go and read all the Punisher comics that you have, and then you can, if you don't like the movie, that's fine, but like, don't expect the movie to be the comics. And to a point, like, I agree with you, Ian, like, there comes a point where you have to say, why bother adapting something if you're not going to do anything from the thing you're adapting, like Super Mario Brothers. And I can even think of, like, like in the X-Men movies, a lot of people really hated the way Cyclops was treated, and I'm not the biggest Cyclops fan, but I'll drink to that. Yeah,
I mean, like, you don't even have to go for something that's as middle of the road as Cyclops. Emma Frost in the movies is wasted twice.
Twice. and I mean, I don't want to turn this into an X-Men discussion, but like, most of once you get to First Class, or really Wolverine Origins, like, most of the characters who are not Professor X or Magneto just get the shaft so hard in those movies. Like, characters who don't have any dialogue at all, but like, they are actual characters in the comics, and then they just show up in a movie and shoot an energy blast, and then that's all they do. Like,
can I just say real quick, I really love how Deadpool 2 played with that trope of the X-Men movies. So fucking funny.
Are you talking about the bit where he said something about there's only one person who lives in this mansion, and then we cut to all the X-Men in a room?
No, in the X-Force, because we do the thing that all the X-Men movies did. Like I remember in X3, the marketing for that, like, there was this FX special where they were like profiling the different members of the different sides of the war, and like, they're like, Spike, he can throw these spikes from his arms. He's a super important part of Magneto's team. And then he's like dead in 2 minutes. Like, the X-Men movies were terrible for the marketing, how cool all the mutants were. And then Deadpool 2 did it. They hyped up X-Force super hard in that movie. And then they all fucking die in one scene. And it was so funny. And like, they almost got in legal trouble because of that. Because I can't remember the name. The one that spits venom.
Zeitgeist.
Yeah, Zeitgeist. That was a Mike Allred character, and they didn't even like, the characters were literally so unimportant to the film that they didn't even bother to contact Mike Allred and get permission to use him. And so, like, it almost got them in a bunch of legal trouble because Mike Allred still retains some of the rights to that character. And
that makes it even funnier.
I know, like, that's just, they cared so little about the character. They knew they were gonna just kill him as a gag, and it's, I really, really appreciate that about Deadpool 2.
I think that's a good place to take something, actually, is like, because once you have an adaptation, the moment you have a source material, you have expectations. How do you guys feel about when adaptions deliberately, not even just because they didn't understand the source material, when they actively change something to elicit a reaction?
Can you give an example?
Very much End of Man of Steel. They kill Zod because the general movie-going audience isn't used to Superman violently snapping someone's neck, even though he's killed Zod before on screen.
Okay. All right.
Like it's deliberately meant to shock people because they aren't they have an assumption going into it. Like again with the Deadpool thing, that's used for humor, is because you have this presumption of X-Men characters and X-Men team, and if you're X-Force like fan or something, you'll be like, oh, they've got a team together, there's going to be something. You have an expectation going into it, and they subvert that for comedy, but some people have subvert it for like drama expectations.
Yeah, I don't know, like it's kind of a cheap tool in the toolkit, I feel. Like, I remember Snyder and Nolan apparently had conversations about how Superman shouldn't kill at the end, and Nolan was like, no, don't do it. It's a bad idea. And then Snyder did it anyway. He's like, but it's gonna freak people out. And Nolan was like, I'm so fucking done with this.
Fucking done with this.
Yeah.
I feel like he was done with it before shooting even began. Like, he seemed like he was just kind of like, I'm just going to sign my name on this. Oh, by the way, don't have him break his neck. And then he did it. It's like, okay. So
don't have him break... Like, Nolan said two things. Don't have him break his neck. Don't do an end credits scene. And Snyder's like, I'm going to take your advice on one of those. And he's like, oh, okay, that good. And it's just like, he assumed it was so obvious which one. And then it's like, of course, because no one can read Zack Snyder because, you know, he fucking takes your virginity with this movie and all this.
Imagine, no, legit imagine how fucking different would the reception to Man of Steel have been if instead of people walking out of the theater like, wow, I can't believe Superman snapped Zod's neck, it would have been, oh my god, did you see fucking Batman watching it on the post-credit scene?
Yep. It would have been...
That could have changed everything. Holy fuck.
Been a different world, man. Been a different world. Yeah, so just, I don't know, that whole shit... It's a tool. It can be used really cheap because it's used really cheap really often. I mean, how many cartoons use a cliffhanger at every goddamn commercial break? You know? It's all the time. Like, so you've got this big dramatic thing to kind of subvert your expectations or pull your interest in, and then it's resolved super easily. Like, if you go into any random action-oriented cartoon show, and you find the moment that there's like a big dramatic beat, and they like zoom in on the character's face who's like, and then it goes to commercial break, and you come back 5 minutes later, and then it's resolved like within seconds. And sometimes it's resolved so basically if like the character just dodges the punch or some shit. Where if you just cut that break out, if you just cut the pause out and go straight to the hit, the scene lost nothing. It was a pointless break just to, you know, draw you in. And so it's just a tool that's used to try to keep interest and generate buzz, and it can be used very badly, but at the same time, using the Deadpool 2 example again, it can be used super well when it's done right. You know, like... I'm the weird one. I don't watch trailers and stuff because even if I don't get any plot reveals, like The Force Awakens, I didn't watch any trailers for that movie on purpose, and I went into the movie and watched it and loved it, had all the great shots and everything, and then I came out and I decided... a few weeks later, I'm gonna watch some of these trailers, and the trailers were like designed to actually subvert your expectations. Like the original Force Awakens trailers were like kind of hinting that Finn was gonna be the Jedi in this new trilogy and all this stuff. And then so even if a trailer doesn't give you plot details, it can still like give you just expectations of the grandeur of the film, of what you're going to see. And trailers are kind of infamous for ruining all the best shots. Something that's really, really funny to me is when they purposely use B-roll in trailers. The trailers for The Dark Knight had a lot of that, and there's one in particular that if you can find it, it's a gem. There's like a 3-second shot in one of the trailers for The Dark Knight where Batman is running on top of cop cars, like on the roofs of cop cars. It's definitely not in the movie, and I puzzle to think about where it possibly would have gone in the film, because it's such a weird image for Nolan Batman to me, but it's just really funny.
Right at the end of the movie, when Gordon is giving his speech to his son, that's when they do it.
Yeah,
it's right there.
So? That's
I
right after he busted his leg that's out for fucking 10 years.
Oh, Fred, I shouldn't be running on these cop cars. Fuck.
Yeah. So no, like you're right, Alfie. It can be used really, really irresponsibly, though.
If I may, I want to preface this by saying I am not going to spoil anything, but as of us recording this, the television series Game of Thrones aired a series finale earlier this week. A lot of people are not happy about it, and a lot of people are. They put out a petition saying they wanted this series this season to be remade. Now, I found myself somewhere weirdly in the middle of the two extremes that I kept seeing. I was seeing people just like screaming at the top of their lungs that this series has devolved in their mind into just incompetency. And they put out this petition saying, let's remake the season. Now, I personally, I did not sign this petition because I haven't watched anything past season 1 of the show. But a lot of people I feel like the reason that they started this petition, they didn't truly think that the season would get remade. I think they were just trying to show in a very showy fashion. They were just trying to say we are extremely disappointed. And then you had people who don't even care about Game of Thrones making fun of these guys, calling them names. And I was like, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. Like, I'm not going to sign a petition. I'm kind of apathetic about a lot of stuff. Like I once upon a time, I would get really upset or really, happy with movies. But now I'm just like, I watch it. And if I like it, then cool, I liked it. But I'm not going to sign a petition, but I'm also not going to make fun of these guys for signing a petition. But with Game of Thrones, a big complaint I'm hearing is that, like, again, no spoilers, but this season was 6 episodes long. And like whatever book this season is eventually going to be based off of, that's a weird sentence, but it's probably going to be over 1,000 pages long. And to try and adapt that in 6 episodes, like the big complaint I've heard from so many people is that it just felt rushed. And like they would say, like, this needed an extra season to kind of flesh out some of the stuff that happened. And I think that's like a huge problem with trying to do an adaptation, especially with something like Game of Thrones, where like the first book was 800 something pages. And I just recently finished watching season 1, and again, no spoilers, but I felt I would watch the show and I would think, okay, technically they didn't leave anything out that was important, but I felt like they were just rushing through the whole thing, when in the book you can take your time and you can get to point B in the same way that the show did, but you're taking your time and you can enjoy the scenery a little bit, if that makes sense.
No, that's definitely true. And Game of Thrones is one of those adaptations where I feel like it's right down the middle. The joke I saw on Twitter about Game of Thrones, I haven't watched the new season either, is now the general public understands what it's like when the anime gets ahead of the manga.
Yeah.
That one really made me laugh. But Game of Thrones, I feel, is like right down the middle, and it's one of those things where it's changed, from what I understand, a lot from the books, and not just that it got ahead, but like just the whole world is almost different in the show as opposed to Song of Ice and Fire, because like my friend Bobby, he was really into the show and he wanted to start reading the books, so he did, and he and I are having a conversation. He goes, I really hope they start introducing the giant spiders, and I'm like, come again? And he's like, yeah, there's just like in the first book, there's a scene where they have to deal with like a bunch of giant spiders, like the size of dogs. And I'm like, man, I'm so glad that shit isn't in this goddamn show. Because the thing I was really attracted to with like season 1 of Game of Thrones was it's fantasy, but it's much more about the characters and politics, and you can actually watch, if you miss the first 5 minutes and you just assume that like everyone's talking about dragons and they're not actually real, like some people in the show don't believe that dragons exist, you can go that whole first season without realizing it's a fantasy show.
Yeah.
You can just go that entire first season, and it is a medieval drama in which some people believe in fantasy creatures and magic, and other people don't. And then the dragons show up, and it's like, holy shit. It's a big deal. But like, that's the thing about Game of Thrones is like, I really like the changes they made in the adaptation, because from what I understand, they adapted the plot, they adapted the characters, and then they decided to leave the magic stuff and make it really, really special, so that when you get any of it, it's really satisfying and interesting. And that's one of the things I really liked about the adaptation there. It was a change I felt made the stuff stronger, and it's a reason I don't really have much interest in ever reading the books, because I don't give a fuck about dog-sized spiders that probably were just thrown in early on because Martin thought he had to spice it up with some action. And from what I hear, those books read like the house of this and the tradition of this by the way of the old gods.
And I'm the exact opposite, because if I had never read the books, I might enjoy the show. You know, I would think it's okay. But once I have read the books, I'm like, I'm never going to watch season 1 again. It's a nice little Cliff Notes version of the first book, but it really is like, you know, if you have this satisfying story about a man who, you know, crosses the country to find some medicine for his dying daughter or whatever, and then you could sum that up by saying, a guy walked across the country and got some Advil. Like, you know, that's to me what it feels like, where it's like it's taking, you know, thousands and thousands of pages of, you know, like you said, you know, the fantasy stuff takes a backseat in the books too. It's there, but it's not the primary element. But the main thing is like character interactions and like political machinations and stuff. And like, getting back to the adaptation aspect, a lot of people are upset with the later seasons that are coming out, and they're allegedly based on books that have not come out yet. People are upset about that because it's not following the strong suit of the books. And so like, what I'm like, I'm in a weird place where if it wasn't for the TV show, I never would have even heard of these books. But now that I've read some of the books, I'm just like, yeah, this show is okay, but like, I'm really more interested in the books.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is like, for me, the interesting thing about the show is it is the character, it is the plot, and the Cliff Notes, but it's really the choice I really like about the show is the tone. The tone that it strikes, the way that it does the fantasy element, is something that just really, really attracts me, because generally speaking, I'm not all that into fantasy. And I like the tone that Game of Thrones strikes in the show. Whereas the books, from what I understand, do all the intricate plot and character work and stuff, but they feel in tone much more quote-unquote typical fantasy. It's just not with a you know, quest kind of fantasy. That's the only thing that really makes them stand out.
I think it's... Oh, you go ahead, Ruben.
No, I was just kind of... I don't know enough about the fantasy genre at large, but I would say I've only read the first 2 books, and they definitely do not feel like typical fantasy to me. It feels like very much like a reinvention of the fantasy genre, but okay. I can't speak to that. Like, you know, I haven't read more than a page of Tolkien, so, you know, I can't really defend or argue against that.
See, well, my thing with this is I haven't read a page or seen the episode of Game of Thrones. I'm completely not a single thing of it. But the comparison, because obviously it's impossible to not see it on your timeline at the moment. The comparison I'm seeing like the anime thing you mentioned, Ian, is like strikingly similar to, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but currently Dragon Ball, the franchise, had, even it's ended at the moment, but had a spin-off series sequel called Dragon Ball Super. And Dragon Ball normally works very much similar to Game of Thrones, where it was a TV adaptation of a book, a manga. However, the manga ended, but the author Akira Toriyama with Dragon Ball Super is still providing source material, kind of. And it's really weird because it gets into a really tricky thing with like, okay, so you've got the author working with you and he's giving you the equivalent of notes. And then you have to take that into a story. Is that still an adaptation of something? Or because you're going off someone else's idea and you're materializing it into a different form? And it's Dragon Ball's especially weird because Dragon Ball Super has a manga and an anime that are both different, but both come from the same notes, but from different studios' interpretations of said notes. And it's really fucking weird, and I don't know how to classify it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at that point, you've almost just got Akira Toriyama there is no longer the author of either. He's just the co-plotter of both, you know? Yeah. Like, that's the really weird thing. Like, you could put, if Toriyama's not writing or drawing a page of Super or writing an episode of Super, then technically, really, all he's doing is just co-writing as the plotter. And like that's a job that like in writing studios, you'll have someone who comes up with a plot and then other people kind of come and add all the trimmings to it to make it an episode. And that's pretty much all Toriyama does now for both things. So yeah, he's just a co-writer on both things at this point. And I mean, more power to him.
Yeah, but then that's the thing, as a direct comparison is where maybe it leads more to specific adaptations in general, is Dragon Ball also had another sequel series without Toriyama's involvement, or very minimal, Dragon Ball GT, and that was entirely from someone else. It seems like it's become a marketing stunt almost to say we've got the original author on helping us with this, even if his involvement isn't really substantial. Like you can give ideas, but how something turns out is very much down to the people who are actually writing the episodes episode to episode. Mm-hmm. Do you guys think do you believe that when an adaptation does involve the original author in some capacity, it gives it more weight, or would you rather someone else completely do a new take on someone else's established material?
I don't have a direct answer to that. I feel that's almost like a false dichotomy. It's really a case-by-case basis to me. I like it in Game of Thrones. I'm of two minds of it, depending on the episodes of Super. Weirdly, I almost tend to like the filler arcs on Super more than the main arcs for some reason. Like that, it's funny, we did the whole Goku Black arc, and that's really, really good, but like, the arc before that it might as well just be the Vegeta Pink arc, right? And it's yeah. I actually like that arc a little bit more than things about the Goku Black arc, even though there's the same premise. It's just switching the character around more or less. So it's just a weird thing. I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example where I'm like, God, I wish the author was dead before they adapted this or something. I'm trying to think of like an example where the adaptation... Oh, duh, I started with it. Alan Moore. Literally anything Alan Moore has ever done. I prefer the movies.
See...
Well, no, I take that back. Killing Joke. Killing Joke's my exception.
Oh, yeah.
Good save.
That's a really good one. Killing Joke there's a huge problem there because that's a short comic book. Like, I remember the first time I read that comic, and I was talking to this guy who, at the time, I was just a complete virgin as far as comics were concerned, and he was like he was guiding me into this world, and...
You're like, notice me, senpai.
Yeah, but I told him I had read Killing Joke, and he said, well, what'd you think? I said, it's really, really short. And, like, that was my first thought on that, and... That's not something, like, if I could go back in time and just, like, get a bullhorn and just go outside of the WB offices and just, 8 hours a day, just scream, "This is not long enough to make into a movie. Stop what you're doing," I would do it, because they had to add like a third of the plot of that was brand new, and also there's a lot of other problems with all of that I don't want to, that has nothing to do with adaptation, but that's a weird thing where it's like, what if we adapted this like 50-page comic into an hour and a half long movie? I don't know if you could do that, and if you did, I just don't. I don't know. Like, what do you guys think?
I think that they should have done it as a short, like as a half-hour short or something, and then just done another thing. When they did. Oh, go ahead. It was so crazy when that movie came out and they added all that stuff, and I initially was like, I see what they're trying to do, particularly because in the last couple of years, Killing Joke has become more controversial. I'm still of the opinion, oh, you mean the Joker, the evil murdering psychopath, did an evil thing? What? But I realize it's kind of dismissive, so I try not to put that hot take out there too much. But I see what they're trying to do, and just it doesn't work because it does too much to acknowledge the problem, and it's too self-conscious. It's not confident enough in itself. You watch that movie and you realize they did this because everyone told them they had to, and I say that as someone who, for years, was like, man, they should really adapt The Killing Joke for one of these animated movies. But what they should have done with that is make a straight frame-for-frame adaptation of the comic. Let it be as long as it has to be, and then make something else to attach to it. The Killing Joke, Mogo doesn't socialize.
Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow?
Yeah. Literally.
Oh, fuck, man. Imagine. Oh, no, you can't say that.
Yeah, just do it. Double piss off Alan Moore. I'll be happy.
I'll be happy. You're fulfilling both me and Ian's dream. You got Superman and Joker wet dreams going.
And Alan Moore's grumbling to himself in the corner. It'll be great. Everyone will be happy except Alan Moore, which will make the world a better place. I hope to God I never meet Alan Moore, and I just know one day I'm gonna knock on my door and I'm gonna go down and Alan Moore's gonna be standing there. It's like, you've been talking a bunch of shit about me on the internet. I'll be like, well, Alan Moore, you're kind of a prick, and then he'll curse
now
me.
You're a crap.
Yeah, he'll curse me with chaos magic, and that'll just be the end of it. Fucking neighborhood association comes over, is like, there's this weird bearded man doing dances in your yard. Yeah, he's putting a curse on my house. I made fun of his comic books.
Mall Santa wannabe.
Yeah, this fucking professional comic book writer and Mall Santa is doing, and wizard. No, but seriously, what if they just adapted 2 Alan Moore stories direct and just had the confidence in it? That would have been fine. But yeah, by adding so much, it lost the confidence in the piece was the problem. That's really what's wrong with it, is there's no confidence in presenting it.
I definitely feel with you can go ahead and finish your point. I'll be appropriate there.
It's a self-conscious piece. It doesn't walk the walk. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I also feel like part of that is the reason why Killing Joke still fires on all cylinders, to me at least, is because it's the two titans of the industry, Alan Moore and Brian Boland, at the peak of their game. That is a gorgeous book. Killing Joke is absolutely horrific. It's horrifying, but it's one of the best drawn comics I've ever seen. I adore Brian Boland's art on that, and Alan Moore, for all his Mall Santa-isms, can write some damn good comics when he wants to, when he's not pissing on them. So I feel like part of the reason why, no matter what that pair did, it was going to be great. The fact that they did the Ultimate Joker Batman finale just elevates that even more. And the problem with adapting that is when you try to match that, if you aren't coming at it with your full guns and you don't have enough reason to say, okay, we're going to faithfully recreate the art style as much as possible. We're going to fly over to Japan. We're going to get the absolutely toppest animators we can. And we're going to fucking make this look gorgeous. We're going to make this look as beautifully visual and horrific to a regular audience as the comic would be to comic fans back in the day. They didn't. They gave it the bare bones stock DC animated budget art style, and
they changed the Batman design to kind of look like Boland's, and it's just awkward.
Yeah, it looks really weird with like the carved in ears. It's just like no. So they go with that, and then they also, for some reason, as if like, okay, so we've got a story here. We've obviously haven't got as big budget because people aren't buying these things as much as we want them to. Why don't, instead of adding shit, use what you have and therefore focus on that to the max? Because like the less runtime, the more fucking frames you have.
Yep. But what if we give Batgirl like a really rapey villain, you know?
Because that will make people think this story is less creepy.
Yeah. Like, I remember Brian Azzarello is such a weird dude. That dude just... Sometimes he knocks it out of the park for me, and other times I'm like, why the fuck is the Joker crying?
Wasn't this... When this movie came out, didn't he like, yelled at somebody at a convention? Like, they called him out on something, and he... What did he say? Do you guys remember that?
That I don't remember. Maybe these are one and the same, but like I remember someone asked him like about why adapt The Killing Joke when it's so controversial, and why put so much focus on the part of it that makes it controversial, and his answer was because it's controversial. And I'm like, that's a bad answer. That's and apparently Brian Azzarello is just like the most nothing person in interviews and stuff. Like people ask him questions and be like, so you're doing this Wonder Woman run and you decided to make her the daughter of Zeus. What really led you to that decision? Made a better story. That's it. Any other creative, you ask them about their work and they just fucking won't shut up. But Brian Azzarello is just a stone-faced bastard.
Speaking of DC animated stuff, so 2007, we began the DC animated universe or DC original, I don't remember what they're calling it, but they do a movie called Superman Doomsday, which is loosely based on the Death of Superman storyline. And I remember so many people on the internet complaining that where's Cyborg Superman? Where's Superboy? Where's Steel? This is a horrible movie. And my response is it's not a horrible movie just because it doesn't do the story from the comics. If you want Death of Superman, go read Death of Superman. Now, the most recent animated movie, or one of the most recent ones, was an adaptation, a 2-part adaptation of The Death and Return of Superman. And I just find myself saying, like, Superman Doomsday is not a great movie, but I'm also like, I don't know. I'm not going to say that it's a bad movie because it made changes. Like, they took the bare bones structure of that epic and they trimmed it down into a 90-minute movie. And I think they did the best they could. And to me, like, you can also do an adaptation, but like the one that came out recently is not a very faithful adaptation. So I'm very curious, those people who are whining about Superman Doomsday, I'm curious what they think about this recent one. But to me, I think that's two very different approaches to the same story. And if given a gun to my head, I would probably rather watch Superman Doomsday, even with it being kind of not a great movie. I still think I'd rather watch that one, where they're taking the basic ideas, this thing happens, and this thing happens, and they're making their own thing out of it, as opposed to like, let's take the comic book and cut it up into a storyboard and then make a movie. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'd take the gun.
God damn.
No, because, all right, this is my thing. Okay, so DC as a company, very established, very little faith in Superman. Very little. They like his brand because it makes some money, but they have very little confidence in said brand. Therefore, they have defaulted to the holy trinity, I like to dub them, of Superman stories they like to tell. There's Superman's origin, Superman turns evil, and Superman dies. And those 3 stories, if DC had their way, would be repeated in cycles, switching variations to nigh infinity. That is why we've had so many adaptations of this god-awful 90s storyline. Fucking, like, please. I know Ian doesn't like it, but please give me a Nightfall adaptation over this fucking shit again. Like, I really just don't want to see Doomsday fight Superman again, because fuck me, it wasn't so great the first time. A lot of the reason why Superman particularly has had such a tough go of it with adaptations is because a lot of the people adapting stuff, it isn't like Batman, where like people know all the great works and they normally do justify it. Like Dark Knight Returns, Killing Joke, Long Halloween, like more or whatever. They all genuinely have earned some merit of their fame, for better or worse, for some cases. But like, Superman doesn't necessarily have that, where Superman's most famous stories, barring All-Star, aren't his best. They're just like the ones that made the biggest pop culture splash because they challenged people, because pop culture can only seem to address Superman rather than as a character, it's just as a figure of pop culture. So you either have to subvert that by making him evil, create that by making him turn up on the scene for the first time, or make a statement by killing him. You get the ultimate adaptation with BVS where they try to do all of them at once. So there you go. Like it's just, it baffles me how so many creators, seemingly talented, who know what they're fucking doing, default to that so often.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I've been meaning to ask you what your thoughts are on this upcoming movie called Brightburn.
I'm looking forward to it because
really?
it's not pretending to be Superman. It's just using the tropes of Superman, which I'm all for. Like one of my favorite comic book series is Irredeemable, where it's completely about like the evil Superman. When it isn't the guy himself doing it and like people pretending, oh, what if this is what he should be like? No. I am 100% for people saying this is why this is a horrible thing and Superman's great.
I was joking when I said that, but I do agree with you. Now I'm being serious. Have you ever read the Marvel comic book series Squadron Supreme?
No, but I know of the group.
Yeah, it's in the mid '80s there was a 12-issue miniseries which basically asked the question, what if the Justice League took over the Earth and tried to make it a better place? And it's a little dated because it's over 30 years old, but I think it's still a pretty good story. And if you like that kind of thing where it's like it's Superman except that it's not actually Superman doing this, then you would probably like Squadron Supreme.
So what we're saying here is Alfie likes the stories where Superman is evil. It's just it can't actually be Superman.
Well, it can't be framed as, because I swear to God, when it was at its peak, I would get constant mentions from people being like, I wish Injustice Superman was the canon Superman. He works so much better as a villain. He's boring as a hero. And it made me want to end everything.
Yeah.
I know we're getting off of the adaptation topic.
Well, it is kind of adaptation-ish, but yeah. I am corrupting it.
No, because I was just going to say, like, in the last 10 years, how many evil Supermen have we had? I mean, it's just past 10 years, but like in Justice League Unlimited, we had maybe evil isn't the right word, but you had the Justice Lords, and then you had Injustice, the video game. You had Batman vs. Superman, which gives us a peek at an evil Superman. It's just happens so often that I'm getting bored with it. Like even, in the Earth 2 comics, there was an evil Superman. Like it seems like we get more evil Supermen than we get good Supermen.
Yeah. Max, the comics guy that makes comics about comics on Twitter, I don't know if you saw this one, but it was really good. Where I think he used Blink even, where they pop into a universe where it's an evil Superman. Then they go, God, we really lucked out. There are so many of these. I'm not sure this is an evil Superman. Based on that hat, I think he might be like Pope Superman or something.
Oh, that's amazing. That is an actual thing. There is a Silver Age comic where Superman wears a Pope hat when he takes over the world.
Of course.
It's canon.
Yeah. It's canon. That means it's good, right? GT's not canon.
For God's sake.
That shit, it gets so old, and that's kind of, I guess, the problem of, you're not going to get any one story. They'll just take from the different resources and tell the story they'll think is interesting. But I mean, it is an interesting story. What if Superman became evil the first time, and then it gets old? At a certain point, you're not subverting the expectation anymore. That's just the expectation I have now, is I'm going to read a story with Superman, and either he's going to turn evil, or there's going to be someone who's worried that he's going to turn evil, and so they're going to take action against him that puts him in a morally compromising position. And so what used to be, Superman is boring because he's so predictable, his powers let him solve every situation. Well, let's subvert that expectation by making his powers the problem. Is now just, hey, Superman's powers are the problem, and that's why people hate him, and so now he's dealing with that. And that's the expectation. How could we possibly subvert this?
One of the funniest things, and I think maybe we'll just like to end this part before we maybe close up the adaptations, but it's just like the Superman Now pitch was like a big pitch Grant Morrison had like in the late 90s. And there is a quote from him on there that makes me smile because this poor man knew what was coming. He's like, maybe we don't do any new evil Superman stories for a while. I think they're getting a bit tired. And there's a late. If only he knew that DC would take that quote and be like, I know what the fuck this guy.
Oh man, poor 90s Grant Morrison, you were innocent. Yeah. All right, so to go off, where else can we go on the subject of adaptation? What else can we talk about with this?
So you guys mentioned Dragon Ball earlier. I mean, this is just like not necessarily a general question, but like, do you guys you both read the manga, right?
No.
Oh, okay, never mind. I was gonna say, like, do you prefer the manga or the show? Because I've read everything before Super, basically. Like, I've read Dragon Ball, what in America, and I maybe in the United Kingdom also, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, the comic or manga, whatever we're calling it. I've read all of that, but I've watched I watched the anime, both of them when I was like in 7th grade, but I remember there being like the running joke was, how long does it take a Super Saiyan to change a light bulb? Like all season, but he's going to scream the whole time. Like, that was to me, like, when I think of the Dragon Ball, specifically the Dragon Ball Z portion, when I think of the cartoon, I think of someone like screaming and energy waves pouring off of him for like episodes and episodes. And I think that's kind of like the Game of Thrones thing where, or it's actually the opposite. Like you were saying earlier, now people know what it's like when the anime surpasses the manga. Like, they have to just add a crap ton of filler. And to me, like, I remember watching Dragon Ball Abridged, where Vegeta and Nappa end up on this alien world with bug people, and I remember watching that like, well, this wasn't in the comic. What's going on here? And it's like, oh, okay, they had to add that in there so they wouldn't, even with the comic being a weekly thing, they were very fast, catching up to where it was. So, anyway, so that, I don't know, I was just kind of...
No, I think one thing I would recommend, Ruben, if you ever do have the inkling or urge, like, oh, maybe I do want to see the Dragon Ball Z portion, because I think the Dragon Ball portion is adapted fairly well. If you want to see the Dragon Ball Z portion, just like with much higher standard voice acting and actually kind of flows better. Like the pacing's similar to that manga as much as you can do with like a 20-minute episodes. Check out Dragon Ball Z Kai. It's a very weird case of an adaptation where we had a source material manga, we adapted it to an anime. However, because we kept catching up to that, we had to make filler and extend fight scenes and, like you say, give the screaming periods for longer because a lot of staring at each other because we had to make sure that we filled the episode time. Kai's like, okay, we've had a few years now. We've got the footage. Let's just edit it down. And they cut it from like the original Dragon Ball Z episodes counts like in the 250s. They cut it to like 90.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Or you could just watch all of Dragon Ball Z abridged.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, that. Do you either want the source material or do you want the source material and the Principal Saiyan's fucking Bulma?
I've got the weird, and this is actually related to adaptations. Dragon Ball Z abridged is the best adaptation of Dragon Ball. I say that even though I haven't read the comics.
I mean, it's great. So I love it.
It's 100% the same characters. You cannot convince me otherwise.
Exaggerated, especially Goku.
Maybe a little, but like exaggerated for laughs, not too heavily otherwise.
Piccolo is 1-to-1. I'll give you that.
Piccolo's 1-to-1. I think Cell's a better character in Dragon Ball Z abridged.
100% agree.
I think Frieza's, like, all it is they just made Frieza funny. He's the same character, as far as I'm concerned. He's just as evil. He's just funny now. He's got quips. That's it. All they did was make Frieza a Bond villain. It's just, like, I'm really struggling to think of characters that are just, no, they bear no similarity to their original counterparts. At least,
I mean, Nappa, Guru, Popo, stuff like that. But
they're
they're
not there
nothing
for
characters.
anything.
Yeah.
They're like not even characters. Nappa's just a strong guy he's a fucking mad dog. They actually make Nappa a character. He's hilarious, and he's still just a mad dog. Guru's not there for anything except to just be a MacGuffin to give us the Dragon Balls and give our characters some power-ups so that they can, keep up in the goddamn race. He does all that, and now he's hilarious. What was your other one?
Popo.
Popo. Yeah, Popo's literally never done anything. He's after Dragon Ball, like. Okay, so I gotta fucking talk about this. So Dragon Ball has this really weird thing where, like, Goku defeats Piccolo, and Piccolo was about to take over, King Piccolo rather, was about to take over the world and all this stuff, and it was gonna be really, really bad, and Goku was the only one who could stop him, and he manages to succeed by the skin of his teeth. And then he goes for more training, and he makes it to the lookout, and he meets Mr. Popo, and Popo does Sun Kid Goku. Fucking dirty. Just like he eats his Kamehameha, he's dodging his strongest punches like it's nothing. It's disgusting. Why the fuck didn't Kami send Mr. Popo to go take care of Piccolo? And I know the answer is because Toriyama didn't think of Kami and Popo yet, but still, there's your adaptation problem. But like, again, Popo, he's by the time you get to Z, Popo doesn't have a character. He's there because they already introduced him, and Toriyama and the team at Toei just had a huge problem ever taking characters that were already introduced out, even though they were nothing. And so, Dragon Ball Z Abridged, Popo does all the same things that he does in Dragon Ball, Z. Now he's just hilarious. And like, seriously, that's all they do, is they add character to it. That is, as far as my estimation goes, is nothing but an improvement. They cut out the whole Garlic Jr. arc until recently, but not missing much there.
That's not even a thing in the comics anyway. So
yeah. The only, I would say it's definitely the best animated adaptation of Dragon Ball. The only thing I would put, I feel like the manga is like the purest you can get, especially because I think something like that is like, yes, you're giving character and stuff like that, but you're also adding a very specific tone to it. And I feel like it is a very good adaptation. Like you said, I agree with all your points where it adds characters to characters, but it also does so at the expense of, it's obviously a parody. So they got much better at this as they got on. Like by the time they were in the South Saga, they were very, very like, you could legitimately like feel the stakes and stuff still. But at least initially, like the Frieza saga lacks a lot of the tension that it had in the original source material, like and stuff like that. So if I want to see Frieza be a sadistic bastard and like be like, oh my god, this is one of the best manga villains ever, I'll read the manga. But if I want to see Frieza voiced by Little Karibo and being like my British snideness embodied, I'll watch the abridged series.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It doesn't have the same tone, but I feel it's a really, really good adaptation in certain ways. I'd say maybe it's more of that down the middle kind of adaptation, but in a really good way. Even though it's changing a lot, but it's changing a lot in order to improve it. At least in my opinion. I'm sure there's someone who's like, oh, Dragon Ball Z Abridged isn't even that funny.
They are wrong.
Yeah, no, they're so wrong. It's the greatest thing ever. It remade me into a Dragon Ball fan.
It is the hype.
I am the hype! Oh, man.
It is, taking it back to what you were talking about earlier, it is to Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z what Max the Comics guy is to X-Men comics. Like, he will crap all over the X-Men a lot. And I'm just over here, like, standing ovation. Like, I love the X-Men, but that is on point. Like, that Professor X is a scumbag. Like, yeah, and so, like,
Put the goddamn X-Mansion in a termite tent.
The one that I was howling with laughter was where Professor X was saying, I forgot to tell you guys, I was having the place fumigated for bugs. Everyone's dying. And Scott is like, Professor, this totally could have been prevented. Why didn't you say anything? He said, Scott, I think we both know that, like, most of my actions are... what did he say? Oh,
most of my actions are completely preventable. This is just my thing.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. That shit's too good. That one, when he went through, like, the lineup of, like, okay, so I'm the secret powerhouse that no one realized, then you're the writer's pet character, then you're the self-insert, and you're the fan character that everyone's been wanting to have be on a mainstay on the book, and then you're... and it's just like, yep, that's the X-Men. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. That shit's too good. Oh. Well, guys, I feel like if we wanted to, we could talk about adaptations for a hot minute here, but I think we're good to wind down here. Did anyone have any final thoughts they wanted to get into?
Guess final thing, because it's always popping up on my timeline, and we don't want to make it to a larger thing, but just like I'm generally curious about so like the Tom Holland Spider-Man thing is, we've had 3 Spider-Man adaptations. Do you think, because a lot of fans have problems with like the lack of Uncle Ben mention and stuff, do you think at the point where something's been adapted to film so many times, change is a necessity just to keep people interested? Or do you think you never have to change something if the source material is good as it is?
I have no problem with change. The Uncle Bill thing...
Uncle Bill.
Sorry. Fuck, I'm tired. Uncle Ben. The Uncle Ben thing seems like such just a... It's like the Raise a Mary Sue argument, almost. Like, there's not... Well, I guess that's a little unfair, because that argument's just complete bullshit, but... It's not even like a thing that's really got any real point to it. It's just like one person said it, it's kind of maybe resonating on some level for people, and so now everyone goes to it, right?
Right.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think if we hadn't gotten the Tobey Maguire Andrew Garfield movies, or maybe if we had just had the Tobey Maguire movies, and then if you just eliminated the more recent Andrew Garfield movies, I think we may have seen Uncle Ben in the MCU, maybe. I think the only reason they did it, it kind of comes back to what you were talking about earlier, Alfie, about subverting expectations. I think people were, the higher ups were like, well, we've had 2 Uncle Bens now. We've seen him die. We've heard the great power comes great responsibility thing. Let's just skip that, and let's just say it's a given. People are going to assume that that's part of his backstory, and we'll just jump right into it. And I think that, like, that's why they did it. I think if we hadn't had it, or if we had only had, you know, the Cliff Robertson Uncle Ben in 2001, and we didn't have the Martin Sheen version, maybe we would have gotten it again, or maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the real kicker there. It's just like it is probably more of a studio decision, but at the same time, Peter's obviously learned the lesson that Ben was created to teach him. And that's the problem, is those first movies in both the other franchises just focus, like, what, a good, the whole first act, right, on that lesson. And ultimately, yeah, if you just assume that he's already got that and he's living by that mantra, you don't need to show Uncle Ben. I could maybe see, like, some of the complaints, like, why doesn't May even mention him or anything in Homecoming? I can maybe see that one. But yeah, as far as, like, does it need to be, do you have to, like, are there things that you have to show, that you have to adapt? And I'm like, maybe, but goddamn, if I've seen the Waynes die enough, like, I don't need to see Bruce Wayne's parents die in the next Batman movie, and honestly, he doesn't even have to mention it. It's a given at this point. If you don't feel you need to address that for the story you want to tell, I don't think you have to show it. I don't think you have to mention it. Alfie, you've watched Homecoming more than I have. Do we get, like, any family photos in Peter's apartment or anything?
No? They haven't cast him or anything as, like, even, like, as a background. Like, oh, that's, a lot of people want Tobey Maguire to be Uncle Ben in the MCU, but
I don't know about all that noise.
Yeah. There's been some things of, like, set photos from, like, Far From Home, and, like, it looks like Peter's wearing glasses, so that means maybe he's a flashback and we'll get something in there. But who knows? It's something there has been, the only thing we have is his suitcase has the initials BP on it, so he's using Uncle Ben's suitcase. That's it.
Okay.
But I think it's fine.
Like, they mentioned Uncle Ben, then whole argument's invalid. It's over. Yeah, like, just, I can kind of see the fact that, like, there's no mention of him in the movie, and it is still a relatively recent loss, because Far From Home, he's been Spider-Man less than a year, right? Or not Far From Home, sorry. Homecoming, he's been Spider-Man for less than a year.
Yeah, 6 months, I think.
Yeah, so, like, I can kind of see it, but at the same time, it's not necessary. Because just Uncle Ben isn't relevant to the story there at all. He has a cameo in Endgame, and kind of a glorified cameo, honestly. He's a bigger part of Infinity War, but Ben really wouldn't fit in that story anywhere. And the lesson Ben taught him is his driving force for joining Tony in Civil War. That's all. I just don't see if they were gonna do it, it would have been in Civil War. Shit.
And I'm not the resident Spider-Man fan. I was totally okay with just skipping past all that. Alfie, were you kind of disappointed they didn't do Uncle Ben?
I feel like a lot of Homecoming, because Homecoming is my favorite Spider-Man movie that isn't Into the Spider-Verse, aka the best film ever made. But it's one of those things where I feel like Homecoming's great, but every time I watch it, I do feel it's held back by the fact that it's the third live-action iteration of Spider-Man. I feel like you could easily replace Ned with Harry Osborn, and you'd have a much richer relationship there, simply because Harry is just a more interesting character. I feel like a lot of not having Jameson in Spider-Man movies being mentioned because J.K. Simmons like crushed that role so hard, and everyone's scared to do someone else instead of just recasted him. So I'm like, that hurts the material as well. It's just like, I feel like I would gladly, in a perfect world, have given up the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies and maybe even the Tobey Maguire ones as well, just because I feel like if Marvel had like complete free reign, like they did with Iron Man, where there was no previous expectations, it would have been like a higher caliber. Homecoming's still a good film, but it would have been like a very upper tier MCU film, I feel. I think it was held back because of audience expectations, and we've been here, we've done this, la da da da. Yeah.
No, I mean, like that's kind of what you had with like with Superman, right? In Man of Steel, it's like that part of the reason for the destruction of Metropolis in that movie was the fact that everyone was complaining for 7 years that Superman Returns, Brandon Roth didn't throw a punch. And so Zack Snyder's like, oh, well, I know how to make Superman throw a punch, and you do.
I'll throw all the punches.
Yeah, like we went to the complete opposite problem. It got too much. And yeah, it's just it's a whole thing. All right. This is a fun one. Thank you for this, Ruben. I enjoyed this.
You're welcome.
All right. Alfie, I believe it goes to you for a review topic, sir.
Right, so I don't know if anyone in the audience or you fellows are actually cultured enough to know that on the time of day of this last Monday, or when this was recorded, the third Monday of May, is the date that Superman saved the world from the devil and proved joy. It's a holiday called Miracle Monday. In celebration of that, I wanted to do a Superman-related thing. So I don't know if you guys have this, so I might have to adjust it if you don't, which is totally fine. Do you have Kurt Busiek's Superman Secret Identity?
Yes.
I don't. I might have it on DC Universe. Let me check real quick. Superman's Secret Identity, huh?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's loading. Give me a sec. Talk. Entertain the people.
So Ruben, just why is X-Men?
Just why is it what?
Why is X-Men X-Men? Why is X-Men?
Yep, it's on here. I'm gonna ask this one a little bit more directly. How many issues is this?
I believe, from the top of my head, 4?
Okay,
yeah, I think that's right,
so there's only 4 issues, and I'm not expecting some kind of like big surprise issue 7.
Why don't you Google it to make sure? Because
Alfie, you're letting me down. Yeah, okay, 4 issues. Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right, I can do it on DC Universe. That's cool.
I think if you combine aspects of Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland, you would have the perfect Spider-Man. That's my hot take.
I really wanted Andrew Garfield to get one more movie where he had to become the human spider, because I really wanted 4-armed Andrew Garfield running around for a bit, because he just has really weird hands, and I would have loved to see the CGI artist try to have to match Andrew Garfield's weird-ass hands.
Oh,
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Forcing me to Google Andrew Garfield hands.
Add that to your search history, folks.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Garfield and Dan Avedon have the weirdest hands. We're doing this. We're Googling Andrew Garfield hands.
Yeah, that's what I was. I was just like, is he gonna? Did he find them?
Yeah, I'm looking at them. They're weird. They got weird big hands. And Dan Avedon has those fucking weird ass toe thumbs. Okay, I'm good. Oh yeah, there's a picture of Andrew Garfield flicking you off, and you see his weird fucking big ass hands.
Okay, I'm good. I'm done. All right, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And I'm a geek for fun.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing things. Alfie, will I ever get the human spider in a movie?
If you do, it will be amazing because I believe